Well, welcome. And today we're going to be discussing the 2025 potato season. We're going to be looking at some of the challenges there's been, very difficult year for weather. We're going to be looking at some of the work that OptiYield have been doing to help growers turn a difficult year into a success. And we're also going to be looking at some of the emerging policy context that's going to affect growers in the future. I'm George Eustace. I was a DEFRA minister for about 9 years, and during that time developed a lot of the future agriculture policies that are in place today. Although I've stepped firmly away from politics, I remain passionate about the environment and food and agri-food, and I've continued to show an interest in the future of this policy. And I'm joined today as well by Simon Fox, who developed the OptiYield system, and also by Chris Gamble, who has got a lot of expertise in particularly biostimulants and also foliar feeds, and has got a lot of experience with particular potato growers. So I want to start, first of all, by this year. It's obviously characterised by a very, very dry season, challenging growing environment for farmers and growers. But Simon, what have you been seeing from growers up and down the country, and how have they managed to make a success of this despite some of the difficulties?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's been a hell of a challenging year for growers and farmers out there. There's been some absolute horror stories being told. But the good news is, from our point of view, for our growers using the OptiYield system, despite the extreme conditions, very hot weather, very dry, some had no rain at all, worth speaking of for 4 or 5 months, they've in general had very good yields. We've had consistent yields, we've had good quality, and so therefore we're very pleased.
Yeah, and Chris, you obviously have got a lot of experience giving people advice on biostimulants and also foliar feeds. Just tell us a bit about, in a difficult dry year, how foliar feeds and biostimulants come into their own and really help give farms that resilience they need.
Yeah, absolutely. This year particularly, there's been a lack of anything in terms of rain, so nutrients coming through the soil have been a little bit more limited. We've seen a lot more deficiency. Being able to use things like the OptiYield system to actually look in the crop, find out what the crop needs for its stage, and put that in a foliar way, in a very safe way, that's been critical this year.
Yeah, I think as well, resilience is going to become an increasingly important issue for farms and also for agriculture policy. I've got this view that over the next few years, building resilience into some of those support schemes that government have, helping farmers make that switch to approaches that give them more financial resilience as well as resilience against extreme weather events, is going to become increasingly important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's acknowledged really that the systems that have been used for the past 40, 50 years aren't really delivering and aren't able to help support that resilience factor, which is why we've developed the OptiYield system, starting with that soil analysis, so we really understand what the soil can deliver to the crop. That gives us a basis on which to create a platform for the rest of the crop. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that on farm. We're seeing farmers being able to deliver consistent yields, wet year, dry year, hot year, whatever, and at the same time reduce inputs quite dramatically.
Yeah. And on that point, that's going to be quite important, is it? Because alongside the resilience issue, there's also, of course, the environmental challenges. A lot of people in the supply chain now, supermarkets, increasingly concerned about their so-called scope 3 emissions, how they can reduce carbon in their supply chain. So tell us a bit, Chris, about how you think these approaches where you use biostimulants and foliar feeds can reduce your fertiliser inputs, because we all know that nitrous oxide from fertiliser applications is probably the biggie when it comes to potato production.
Definitely. Anything you can do to reduce the amount of nitrogen you're putting on, particularly because that's one of the biggest elements, phosphate as well, and anything you can do to improve the soil structure so that it's assimilating nitrogen, or phosphate is being mined out of the soil by microbes that are going on in things like symposium, that makes a real difference to the crop and makes a real difference to the farmer's profitability, really. Yeah. And is building that sustainability by building the resilience of the soil.
Yeah.
And that
Couldn't
is,
agree more.
that's,
And Simon, I know through OptiYield you've been doing some work with the TRIP program, which is a joint program with a number of academic partners as well, aimed at looking at how we can reduce those inputs in potato production, both for the environment but also for financial resilience of farms. Tell us a bit about that, how and what you see the future being.
Yeah, well, we've been lucky enough to be part of a series of Innovate UK funded projects, and this TRIP project is the latest in those. It's quite a big project. We're working with Dyson Farming Research, Light Science Technologies, James Hutton Institute and Bangor University, and it's been running for 3 years. This is the final year, and for our part, it is centred on our OptiYield approach, and it has essentially demonstrated that this approach works. But it is the basis of it based on as a holistic system with a programmatic approach, starting with the soil and building through the crop demands, variety specific. That really makes the difference.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, I think what we're going to do now, we're going to move to a couple of films, which is going to give us some individual case studies. We know that the big issues on people's minds is that resilience point, as we've discussed, and also some of those emerging agendas as well around environmental impact. So let's now move to the first farm, which is a farm run by the Elliots in Pembrokeshire, and then we can have a discussion about the approach that you took, Simon, with that farm afterwards.
Hello, we're here at Cresswell Barn Farm in Pembrokeshire to see Patrick Elliott, the farmer here. They're a family farm. They've been farming potatoes now for a couple of decades. They've been using our OptiYield system from Emerald Research for the last 10 years, so we want to see how Patrick's been getting on with that, particularly this year, which has been a very challenging season, as so many seasons are now increasingly challenging. So let's go and see Patrick in the field and see how he's getting on. Hello, Patrick.
Yes, I'm
Great to see you. So, Pat, how have you found the process of implementing OptiYield? Because when we first met in 2015, you started with 5 hectares to try it, and we're now just about doing the lot. How have you found that process over the past few years?
Yeah, no, I mean, we slowly grew into it a bit at a time, I guess, with that 5 hectares, and then I think we went up to 15 the next year, and then 50 hectares the year after that, and then I think after that we've implemented across the whole growing for us. We wouldn't look back, to be honest. With the last trial we did, I think it was back in 2022 on a field of whites, which we ended up seeing about a 3 or 4 tonne an acre yield difference. And yeah, from then we didn't really need to second guess it anymore and wanted to continue with it, to be honest.
But I think you said to me previously you think that on average you're getting yields between 15 and 25% higher than you were previously. Was there a particular moment where you thought, aha, this is doing something?
The symposium is definitely a big positive. After seeing the difference in emergence, and you're digging around in the ground and you're seeing the mass of roots around there compared to our sort of standard programme back what it was then with the Amistar, definitely makes you think that you're doing something right, and you want to continue doing something right and following the whole programme really. So
one of the foundations, as you know, is using our symposium bacteria and biological and biochemical product at planting. Do you think that has real benefit?
And it's a lot kinder on the soil, in my opinion, and we know that as well. We used to use Amistar and never looked back now since we used Symposium. The main thing from a salad point of view is the emergence, because you could be getting between 3 and 7 days faster emergence, which is quite crucial that beginning part of the season for the salads really. So yeah, no, definitely positive, and which we'll be using further for next year.
And do you see an effect in rooting? And
yeah, no, definitely. The rooting is a big issue this year, considering the dry weather. If we didn't have the root mass like we had then this year, I don't think we'd be able to find what moisture they did find in that dry weather. So yeah, no, definitely a big positive.
As you know, we've seen over the past decade, increasingly extreme weather conditions during the season. Have you found that yields generally year to year have been maintained no matter what the conditions?
Definitely. Without your program, I definitely think we'd have seen some sort of deficit, whether it was root mass and if that affecting the total yield, to be honest. The likes of foliar N and superphos and all the foliar feeds we can apply to it, I think definitely work a lot better than having to think about what we can put extra on the base, really. And going forward, it's definitely something that we want to keep on going with it, to be honest.
So are any particular tuber qualities that you see consistently above and beyond what you would have seen before?
I mean, the tuber evenness, size-wise, is definitely a big positive. And also, you leave the ground a lot better conditioned as well without using chemicals in the ground and planting. The symposium does a lot better job, really. So we're definitely happier overall doing the program in full, from planting to harvesting as well, really. So
when we're looking at the programs earlier in the year, we cut down on nitrogen and phosphate again as we've done over the last few years. Has that worked for you?
Yes, definitely. It's always a target of ours to try and reduce fertiliser inputs, and especially with the environmental side of things, and also a cost factor as well, to be honest. And if we can try and narrow that down year on year and take small jumps rather than one big leap, I think that's a big improvement, really, from our business's efficiency side and also from environmental side as well, really.
Just on the environmental side of things, have you seen any environmental benefits with the reduced use of nitrogen, phosphate or other inputs?
Yeah, no, I mean, all round, I think definitely from the programme we sit down and talk through in the winter and try and eke out a bit of nitrogen and phosphate use and just see where we can make improvements and thinking we're not jumping the gun with 2 feet, but also knowing that we're doing small improvements at a time. I'd like to think we could cut it a bit more next year, but we'll have to sit down and properly look at it and say, well, where can we make improvements, really? So
you've mentioned it again, but from an environmental point of view, improved crop health, crop vigour, rooting, things like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Seeing when you came down 2-3 weeks ago in your previous visit, just seeing the depth of ground that we've got there for the roots to be growing into. There's not a pan underneath the ground, so they can't go anywhere. And I think in a year like this is vital with having those roots that can keep on growing and trying to find what moisture they can while it's so dry, because they don't stand much chance otherwise. Really.
I think you make a very good point. I think making sure that you've got the soil structure underneath to be able to support the plant you're trying to grow on the top, particularly with a crop as poor rooting as potatoes, is absolutely vital. You're right. I mean, things like symposium will really invigorate root growth and root exploration, but if it's hitting a pan, it's not going to go anywhere. So having that soil structure is really key to.
And if we can do what we can to give it the best possible chance of getting the best crop we can to get out of it, then we'll keep on doing so, to be honest.
Yeah. Given what you've been telling us, Pat, would you recommend our system to any of your neighbours? What would you say to them?
I definitely encourage it and say, look, just give it a go. I'm 99% certain you would be seeing a difference, whether that's canopy, rooting, or ended up being tuber yield and tuber quality at the end of it. So
it was great to see Patrick there in the field in his brand new Grimmy Veritron and harvesting potatoes, and great to see such fantastic potatoes coming out the ground and at such a good yield. As you can see behind me, they're now back in the yard grading the potatoes out, and they'll be boxed and ready to go to the supermarkets in due course.
Well, that was very interesting, Simon. Tell me a bit about Patrick Elliott. How long has he been using the product? He mentioned in the film that he's using it on the whole crop now. Has he been using it for quite a while?
Yeah. They've been using the system now for 10 years, and they're using it on the entire potato cropping, which is 500 acres, around 500. In fact, it may be slightly more now. Mixture of salads and main crop, right from the coast of Pembrokeshire to well inland, usual distribution for potato farming. They've increased every year, as he said, from about the first 3 years to doing the whole lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. And a number of interesting things coming out there. particularly I was struck by the root mass point, which obviously then feeds into a lot of the other things. And Symposium mentioned quite a few times, which I know is one of the products you've developed under the OptiYield system. Tell us a bit about Symposium and what it does and what its mode of action is.
Okay, well, it's a synergistic mix of bacteria, fungi, mycorrhizal fungi in particular, and matching biostimulants designed to improve growth from planting onwards.
And Chris, how does it work?
It's, as Simon said, it's very synergistic. The so what about it really is that the sources of each of the individual components have been individually tested to make sure that the sourcing is correct, the count is brilliant, and then they've been put together and tested. So from a resilience point of view, from a quality point of view, we're really starting with the best ingredients. We've got some great activity there.
Okay, interesting.
And that's what makes the difference.
Yeah. And Chris, coming on to the foliar feed part of that system, what do you think, has that contributed to that root mass?
Where the root mass thing kicks in is the synergistic, laying a really good foundation for a very good crop, taking out a lot of stress and enabling the plant, the evenness of the crop, to have the best response to subsequent treatments. And then when you go in with the subsequent treatments, they're building on that really good foundation within the knowledge of the system. And that's what makes it unique and different.
I think one of the key components is that, particularly potatoes, they're a very poor rooting crop. So if you can develop the root mass by, we would say 40-50% more root mass, maybe more in some cases, combined with good soil structure, you get a much better rooted crop. Not only does that mean you're going to get better resilience in terms of water availability and water uptake, but it also means they're exploring the soil and getting hold of more minerals, more nutrients than they otherwise would do. The other aspect of it is because we're not using other chemicals in the soil is in a sense allowed to recover. So you'll see quite a lot of earthworm activity and other biotic activity in the soil, leading to, again, better structure and therefore a healthier, more vigorous.
Yeah, and that came out very strongly in the film, actually, his view that this contributed to much better soil health, care of the land. A lot of potato farmers obviously rent land from landlords, and potatoes isn't always the first choice of crop they'd want. So quite interesting to see that bit of it as well, about caring for the land and the soil.
The soil, the whole thing starts in the soil, and as you know, our OptiYield system starts with the soil and the soil analysis. Indeed, Patrick Elliott, this year, as he has every year for the past 10 years, has taken, it's always going to be new fields because they're moving around, they're renting land. I think we had 58 soil samples taken, which we analysed using our OptiYield system. That gave us the full recommendation programme, of which Symposium is a part. They gave us the base fertiliser programme, which reduces the amount of fertilisers being used at planting. It's saving them money, it's saving on the environment.
Yeah.
But it then means that we have a reliance, as Chris has indicated, on foliar programmes in the season, and the formulation of those foliar products is absolutely critical.
Now, it was interesting as well. There were some good other points in there, I thought, around emergence, speed of emergence. So they were getting the crop coming up, getting going sooner with more vigour. Do you put that down to the Symposium, or is that other factors?
I think it is very largely down to the Symposium, and also the fact that we haven't been applying fungicides, which tend to actually check early growth and early vigour in the absence of things like disease. That early vigour, that early health, we start with a more vigorous early crop, very important for salad potatoes, but just as important for main potatoes as well, main crop potatoes as well.
And Chris, what do you think of that point?
Yeah, no, it takes me back. I was just thinking of Linford Christie, get off on the B of bang. And that's the thing with the Symposium, is the crop is in the ground, out the ground. It's that evenness, it's that speed of growth The plant is already vigorous. It's already, if I use the word vibrant and alive, it's getting going, and you're not fighting that rear guard on disease and pest all the time. Yes, things come in, but you're on a positive note.
What typically are you seeing, Simon, when symposiums used, and potentially in combination with the rest of the programme as well?
Well, when the full programme is used, and Patrick and the other guys have been using the system now for, as we say, for 10 years, increasingly, and as Chris said, that early vigour, that early vibrancy leads to a crop that is ahead of the game. That is the key to growing these crops. So once you've got that going, the rest of the season is about maintaining that. Now we maintain that because we've got a better rooted system, a more vigorous system, but we're also feeding it with these foliar nutrients throughout the programme that are matched to the actual needs of the crop, given what the system is telling us we need, as opposed to, frankly, the guesswork we get from other systems. And the yields we've been getting, they've been on their main crops, getting a consistent yield. And when you consider that it's largely unirrigated, hosepipe bands had very, very little rain, getting those types of yields under these conditions, I think is quite astonishing, frankly.
Yeah. Now, we could tell at the end of that video, the harvesting equipment being used, there's a clue there. The Elliots are obviously quite large growers.
Yes.
What sort of spread of growers do you have? I mean, is this a system that can work for some of those smaller growers, or does it tend to be the bigger growers?
No, that's a really good question. Really works for any scale. If you are a commercial grower and you're looking to get a better bang for your buck, to put it crudely, if you're trying to get better yield, but even more importantly, net margins, it really doesn't matter whether it's 20 acres, 50 acres, 100, 500, or 1,000. This system will work under all of those conditions.
And Chris, do you find that as well, just in terms of encouraging growers of all sizes to sort of make that switch and embrace the benefits they can get from it? Is there more resistance from some of the smaller ones because they see it as being more complex, or not?
No, it's not a complex system. It's the adoption of the system is actually very easy because it doesn't rely on anything. You don't have to go buy anything that you haven't already got. So from that aspect, it's not even a real mind change, because what you're seeing is believing, and because, let's take the foliar nutrients, they're specifically designed to be safe but very fast acting. So you're not waiting for your nitrogen to arrive via the soil process. It's there, sprayed on the crop. The nutrient use efficiency is high in the 90s, and it's there immediately.
Yeah.
So the actual nutrient balance and the value to that crop is, it's immediate, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's been fascinating. I think now we should move and have a look at the second case study, which is a farmer in Somerset, Philip Vaux. So let's have a look at that second film, and then we can have a discussion on that after.
Yeah, great.
Hello, we're here in South Somerset, New Ryden Farm, with Philip Vaux of D. Vaux and Sons. We're here to look at the potato lifting after a very difficult season, and to see how they've got on and what Philip thinks of what we've been doing using our OptiYield program for the first time on this farm for this year. Philip, what's been your conclusions from this year?
Yeah, I mean, we've changed our regime from what it was. We've been using solid fertilizers and some foliar seaweed products and liquid nitrogen for later in the season to more of your products this year. We want to be able to try and reduce the amount of fertilizers that we're using at planting or at mid-season.
As you're renting a lot of ground, as many people do when they're growing potatoes, it fits potentially quite well with our approach, which is to feed the crop rather than putting too much fertilizer in the soil in the hope that the plant can find it.
Yeah, no, that's quite right. We always, maintain, my father before maybe, maintain, give it plenty of muck under it to start with. It'll help the crop grow in difficult seasons like we've just had, very, very dry.
Yes, indeed. And the foliar program on the top allows you to tune that to suit the conditions.
Yep.
Especially where in a situation like this year, unirrigated, you've got very dry soils, a lot of that place fertilizer would be largely unavailable to the crop simply because there's no moisture in the soil to make it available. How have you found the change?
Well, the crops have looked very well. We've been using the consortium of planting with some superphos, and then we went on to the micronutrients for each field.
So the Symposium product, of course, is our multimicrobial product that you put down at planting on the seed, and I think you were using that instead of Amistar, which would be your normal application.
Yeah, we've been using Amistar on fields where we're fodder beet and potatoes in the rotation, so that it was just to reduce the amount of Bosectonia that we were getting in previous years. We've not used the consortium on fields where there's no roots in the rotation, but I think we probably should have done.
Okay, that's interesting. And how have the potatoes come out? Have they been clean, looking good?
Yeah, I mean, certain varieties have done better than others. The Taurus and the Tomino produced the numbers, but we just haven't got the size like we would hope for.
But then you've only had, how much, 40 millimetres of rain since March?
Since the beginning of March, we've had around about 40 mil of rain till the end of August, or when the weather broke there a few weeks ago.
And most of these crops are unirrigated.
Yes, we've only got one block of land that we can irrigate, which has yielded pretty well, really, considering. But the rest of the farm, we're using quite a bit of manure in the way of farmyard manure, pig muck and chicken litter, because we're doing a crisping variety for our suppliers where a skin finish is not an issue.
Well, I've noticed that one of the characteristics of your cultivations is that you have good soil structure underneath the rows, which has allowed the root growth to penetrate further down, being aided by that Symposium product to root better and deeper. I think that's probably helped survive the drought better than it would have done. Would you agree?
Yes, I mean, it's one field we've got, which is a little way away from here on some fairly sharp sandy soil. Didn't have the consortium because it's not got roots in the rotation, and that crop is not going to yield us terribly heavy yields.
So Philip, these are the Amanda we've just been looking at in the field coming in. They look to be a nice even sample. As you said, there are a few smaller ones because it's been so dry, but what's your take on these?
I guess if we hadn't used your products, who's to say? I would have said, you know, that the potatoes probably would have been a lot smaller. It's an even sample, and it's not oversized, and there's not too much undersize, which is quite good, really, because that can, you can lose a lot of yield through undersize. And considering the conditions that we've had weather-wise, I would say that the yield will be fair to middling, without looking at exactly how many we've had off this field so far. Once we finish the field, we'll know better what sort of yield we have had, really.
Yes, fair to middling is probably a bit of a result given this year.
Yeah, certainly is.
What's the plan for next year?
Well, we're going to be carrying on growing potatoes and aim to try and improve on inputs, keeping the inputs down as low as possible because the returns don't go up to correspond with it. The cost of seed is quite expensive, so we've got to try and make some savings somewhere along the line.
So if we can drive things like the amount of fertilizer you're putting in the ground down, so that we're feeding the crop and not the ground, then that would be an advantage.
That's what we've got to try and do, yeah. We've got to do what we can to help it.
Yes, and you've obviously offset that with your attention to detail you put into cultivation and the manures that you're putting in as well, which all help soil structure and manures, and that sets the scene. I think for our part, what we've tried to do is add in inputs like the Symposium with the superphos at planting, which really help that early rooting and early vigour, get the thing coming out the ground faster and improve that deep rooting. And then to supplement that with things like the foliar nitrogen, the foliar phosphate and potash during the season. And lastly, when it was getting really stressed, putting on things like the sea spray just to try and take off the edge of the crop stress.
Yep.
Would you agree that
Yeah, I would say so. The program that we've used this year would have certainly helped. Had we not used it, I dread to think what we would have had. You know, it would have been complete disaster. I think the disaster has been avoided by putting on what we've done so far this year. We've got to work on it, for the next year to see what we're going to do for next year. I mean, none of us know what the weather's going to give us, so
No.
we've got to help it as much as we can.
We never know what's happening season to season. This year's been incredibly dry. Previous season was very wet and cloudy. So the flexibility of our system and the resilience it builds into the crop means that we can hopefully maintain the yield year on year, no matter what the weather and the climate throws at us. If next year turns out to be, by miracle, one of the good years, what's the sort of yield you'd be looking for from your Amanda, from your Taurus, from your other varieties to put a smile on your face?
I guess if we're knocking sort of 17 to 20 tons an acre for a crisping yield, it's pretty good. If it's more than the 20 tons an acre, then we're on a bonus. But the problem being, then I expect we'll end up with everybody will have a big yield, and then the price will drop out of the market completely. Although most of what we sell is done under contract.
So if we can help you achieve good yields in a tough year, then that's the best of all, because everybody else is doing badly and you're doing well.
Yeah, well, one would hope so. Yeah.
Great.
So wow, 40 millimetres of rain. It just shows what an incredibly dry and challenging summer it's been. And Philip there looked like absolutely relieved that he had used some of this product. And I thought quite interesting talking there about the abilities of the plant to withstand more stress in this difficult growing season. So tell me a bit about Philip. I know he's been using the product for a bit, but seems to be increasing his
well, I've known Philip Vaux for at least a decade, but we've only really started in earnest this year engaging, and he decided this year to bite the bullet and did over 100 hectares. So you're probably talking 225 acres of potatoes using our system. And as you say, he seems to have picked a good year and seemed very relieved. I mean, at the end there, he said if he hadn't used it, there'd have been a complete disaster. And that's his words. But I have to say, I think he's on a good point, because we managed to establish those crops really well, get really good rooting. It was quite obvious from early looking into those crops when we did crop inspections back in May and June, how well they were established. The symposium was playing the part there, as were other things, but we've got other things going on there, and we got the crop nutrition right from the beginning.
Yeah, and Chris, this is a farm that doesn't have irrigation, or at least on most of his land. I think he said he doesn't have access to irrigation. How, has that been a big challenge for growers this year? And what role can microbials and biostimulants play in that sort of scenario?
Definitely, it's a very good question, because abiotic stress, heat stress, is something we haven't really been challenged with in this country. So it's quite often difficult to get a good response to biostimulants. Yeah. But this year was different. This year, because of the abiotic stress mitigation, if you like, in some of the components in the OptiYield system, we're able to change emphasis slightly, and which has built yield for the guy. Yeah. And that's critical.
So you can adapt the program a bit to make sure that it gives you that extra resilience in a difficult year, in a dry year.
Absolutely. When you know you're going to get the response, and the science tells you you're going to get the response, it's built into the system.
And what about then the role of foliar feeds as well? If you've got very dry soil, nutrients harder for the plant to get access to.
If you can't get it from the soil, you've got to put it in the leaf. The OptiYield system tells you what you want. It's surgical precision. It's there, it's in, it's working.
And the other point I thought Simon was very interesting, Philip was very interested in reducing fertiliser inputs and coming out from the, if you like, the sort of financial side of things as well, getting those costs down. We know it can be a challenging sort of market, so getting those costs down by reducing your inputs. He seems to have been able to get his fertiliser inputs down quite considerably.
Yes, and I think, as Philip said in that video, they're unlikely to be paid much more for potatoes. The prices of potatoes have always been a bit on the soft side over the past few years, and I don't really see that changing. So it's important for them to be able to drive down costs, fundamental costs, as well as us being able to increase or sustain yields in the very difficult seasons. It's the balance between those two things.
Yeah.
So we can cut his nitrogen and his phosphate and his potash inputs in the soil down a long way and still maintain yields or even increase them.
Yeah, and Chris, have you got a view about how far down can people go on that first base application of fertilizer? Obviously it's a high input, high risk crop. Farmers will always be a little bit cautious of how far they can dial back that fertilizer input.
It's a measured, managed system, so it's not out of control. It's not gambling. It's science, and by applying science and looking at nutrient use efficiency in these formulations and what the plant is actually wanting or needing is what it's getting, that's the critical part. You've de-risked it, and that's the sustainability part.
And I would emphasise that it is a programmed approach. It's that balance of nutrients, the input of specific biostimulants for a specific purpose at specific timings, which is all endemic to the programme. That is what is making the difference. It's the sum of the parts. It's not a product-based approach.
It's building on that foundation and taking it through to the finish, through to the harvest, and that's It's
and then on the harvest, we saw the potatoes at the end. I thought the other interesting thing to come out of the film was his comment about the evenness of the size. That you didn't have too many oversized or undersized. It was quite uniform. You were getting a good specification of potato right in the sort of where the market demands.
Yeah, and that's because because of the programmed approach. I mean, the symposium at the beginning very much helps to set a vigorous plant. That helps it set right amount of tuber numbers. We can certainly improve tuber numbers and tuber count at that time using that product. But the use of the foliar nutrients at specific timings means we can also essentially program into the crop the tuber size distribution as well.
Right.
So it's not just about the numbers; it's about evenness. That is part of the program. So he ends up with an even set of tubers, whether they're salad potatoes, whether they're crispers, whether they're main crops. We have programs that fit all of those different types.
So do you think, Chris, it's the case if you get the nutrient absolutely spot on right by this more precise approach, the varieties basically perform as they're designed to, and those sort of other environmental impacts are lower.
The crop can achieve its potential and get the marketable yield that the farmer needs at an input price. It's finance. It's simple farm economics.
Yeah, and we're including in this because, as you know, the weather is unpredictable more than a week or two ahead. We're including into the OptiYield system our monitoring systems, which include day degrees and variety-specific characteristics and tissue analysis, so that we can monitor the changes in the crop and respond accordingly in virtual real time. Whereas too many other programs, standard programs, are too reactive and after the event when it's already too late to be able to do much to affect it.
And that's the critical thing of being able to combine the biostimulants with the nutrition, because being there when the plant needs it, not when the plant needed it, is a huge part of the success.
Ahead of the curve rather than behind it.
It's a success of the system.
Interesting. Well, I think those are both very, very interesting films. We're going to, I think, have a more detailed discussion now on some of the science behind it, and just try and unpack in a bit more detail exactly what it is about these biostimulants and foliar feeds that enables these farmers to get a success even in a difficult year.
Indeed, and I think the basis of all of it starts with the soil. That is where we start. We'll have a look at that, and then how these other components fit into that program as it rolls out.
Well, it's been fascinating to discuss those two individual case studies. What we're going to do now is delve a bit more into some of the science behind this, and I want to start where all good growing starts, Simon, which is the soil. Tell us a bit about the soil analysis that you use to inform the program? Because I know I've heard you speak before about some of the old methodologies that have been around since pretty much just after the war. You've got some quite strong views about how things should be done differently. Tell us a bit about that soil analysis.
Yeah, right. Well, as you rightly say, George, we've been essentially using, or the UK has been using soil analysis methods and probably worse interpretation of those analysis results in exactly the same manner for 50 years. It was 1974 that RB 209 was first published, and it's changed little in terms of certainly PK, Mg and other nutrients since then. So what we needed to do was get a better grip on the actual fertiliser recommendations that farmers need, because they weren't getting the right advice. They're still not getting the right advice. So we redeveloped soil analysis interpretation from the ground up, if you'll forgive the pun. And as a soil scientist of some veteran soil scientist now of many years, and having established some laboratories and things myself, I had a fundamental look at the techniques used and the interpretation of those, and we have that as the foundation for OptiYield.
So tell us about phosphate in particular. I know there's an issue around the availability of that.
Yes.
Presence and availability to the plant aren't necessarily the same.
Yes, well, there's a pretty poor relationship with standard soil analysis numbers, result you get, and actual plant availability of phosphate. So we set around to correct that. And we've achieved that by developing a thing called the phosphorus sorption index. We have two independent methods to calculate that for every sample we do, therefore for every field. And that allows us to predict much more accurately the requirement for phosphate by that crop, and also by interpretation, the best manner of applying that. And
Chris, you've been nodding as well. Is that, you recognise that challenge on phosphate, that it's conventional analysis doesn't tell you the whole story?
No, exactly. So phosphate is there, you're applying it, it's been broken down and made available and so on and so forth, and a lot of it is contained within the soil, is measured as such, but isn't available to the plant. It has to be solubilized, or made more soluble and available to the plant. And as the life in the soil isn't there, so the microbes aren't there to do that job, and therefore, even though you've measured it and you've ticked the box, the plant can't access it, so you're already limiting yield. So the beauty of this system is it doesn't just tell you what you've got, it gives you the knowledge to make the decision, and then the tools in the OptiYield system to overcome it. And
what about pH of the soil? Does that have an impact on some of the microbials, so beneficial bacteria and fungi? Can it affect the way they operate or their ability to survive?
It can do, definitely. What we've done within the OptiYield system, obviously you're measuring the pH of the field. We know what strains are operating. Potatoes generally are in more acidic soil anyway, so the strains have been selected to operate within that range. But you're not looking at just one strain or two or three, you're looking at a whole football team. Right. So that you've got the balance, but at the same time the focus, if that makes sense.
And so a big part of probably trying to get the pH in the right zone, so that the beneficial bacteria perform.
If there is a difference, then that can be balanced.
Yeah. Okay. And Simon, on the potassium issue is another key one. Tell me a bit about how you approach the analysis on potassium, and whether there are antagonisms with certain other trace elements.
There's two issues which we've addressed and overcome, again, to provide the farmers with a much better view on how they should be applying potash and how and when they should be applying it and how much. The first is, while we have a number derived from laboratory analysis saying the amount of potash that's available, it gives us no indication of the supply rate. Crops will demand, at the maximum demand, a particular level of potash per day, and the soil may contain a lot of potash but may not be able to deliver it at the rate required. Right. So you still get a potash deficiency.
And the remedy there is presumably a foliar application of some sort? Exactly.
So we look at foliar applications and other ways around it.
And does that change between varieties? So can you model that demand for certain nutrients, and it's different for, say, a salad potato to a crisping potato?
Even more granular than that, we can identify it down to the variety level. So we can look at a variety at a particular growth stage and identify the demand rate for actually all of those major and minor nutrients from tissue analysis, but also by prediction beforehand from the soil analysis, and therefore program in the exact timing and amount of nutrient required to make sure that it is fully satisfied.
And Simon, we heard from Chris earlier that one of the strengths of the system is it tries to get kind of ahead of the curve, predict what the plant needs, give it to it in time, rather than playing catch up all the time. Tell me a bit about how the analysis of the soil and the approach taken actually delivers that.
No, you make a very important point. One of the key facets of the OptiYield soil analysis system is that it's predictive, and therefore you can be proactive about the fertilizer recommendations. Standard soil analysis recommendation systems do not provide a terribly clear, despite the numbers, despite the so-called indices, do not provide a clear guide to fertilization, and therefore it almost relies on tissue analysis later in the season to determine whether what you did was right. What we're doing is predicting this much more closely, so that we know that we're doing the right thing from the beginning. So we're proactive and we're not reactive. And the same is true from our leaf tissue analysis system, which is variety specific and driven by days after emergence. We can tell from that tissue analysis early on in the season whether the crop is going in the right direction, specifically to that variety, and make corrections there and not find out too late, reactively later in the season.
Yeah, and that's the important piece. Biostimulants work best when they're applied at the right time. So just before they're about to have the effect, the plant is then primed to be at the optimum to get the best out of that product. If you're relying on leaf tissue tests without the knowledge that you've got and the basis of the OptiYield system, it's what the plant needed as opposed to what the plant will need.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference when you're going
timeliness
for optimal
is a big part of getting
timeliness is everything.
Yeah.
This is moving another dimension. This is moving it to another level.
And what about trace elements? Is that affected at all by some of the other macronutrients? Can you get antagonisms?
You can get antagonisms. There's a huge number of different antagonisms. The system takes those antagonisms into account. But you already mentioned pH. pH is one of the key factors as an antagonist. But there are also interactions between different nutrients, for example, magnesium and potassium and calcium. And then there are interactions with other things within the soil, which we also look for, like bicarbonates and carbonates, soil aluminium, etc., etc.
What helps mitigate some of that is the way the root architecture's changed with the symposium and some of the biostimulant aspects of that symposium. And then also the root is plugged into the soil with the use of mycorrhiza, so that the available nutrient is basically transported straight into the potato. And the potato can access more of it faster if it wants to. So that relationship between the plant and the soil is I would say, well, synergistic. It's accentuated, which helps the system. It helps the potato. It certainly helps with, well, as we've seen this year, the drought.
Yeah.
And this is it. Well, there's a sort of symbiotic relationship. Those beneficial bacteria want a healthy plant, so they'll help support it.
It's symbiosis.
Yeah. I mean, the bacteria and microbes generally are living off exudates from the roots. They want to encourage the production of those exudates, so they produce things like plant hormone precursors and other mechanisms to encourage root growth and root development, so that they can have access to those root exudates. So it is very much a symbiotic process.
Yeah, and we're seeing quite a change in people's thinking around the conventional division between crop protection as a silo, and plant health and plant nutrition. And how much can this contribute to a sort of simpler approach to pesticides, just because you've got a healthier, more vigorous plant?
It's significant. In the last number of years, we haven't really needed to think about it because we've had pesticides available to do things. As we now start to think about soil microbiology, soil biota, improving soil health and crop resilience, certainly with regard to water and weather and so on and so forth, and we start to think about carbon, these aspects, actually, we're now kind of rediscovering that healthy plants and the interaction with microbes, with whether we believe in induced host resistance and systemic acquired resistance, these things are actually scientific proof. So it's now very much saying we'd kind of forgotten that, and it is significant, and that is something actually that we're seeing a reduction in, blight spray number, or we're not under such blight pressure that we were with things like the optimum, the OptiYield system.
Yeah,
so
we've managed to reduce the number of blight spray applications, even under blight pressure, because of the holistic approach we're taking. We have a more vigorous, healthy crop, and the inputs and biostimulants we have in that process help to keep it that way. And we've proven in multiple independent crop trials with a variety of universities that we are improving that aspect, and have done even the genetic research to look at what genes are being upregulated and downregulated as a result of what we're doing.
So on the soil testing front, there's obviously farmers will already be doing soil tests on their ahead of planting to understand what's needed. They've got some of that. How much extra work and effort and cost is it for them to do this sort of extended methodology that you would need to be able to understand their soil properly?
Yeah, for them there's no extra involved. It's soil sampling as normal, sent to the lab, but using our forms and our own bags. We even have prepaid bags to send off. The results come back to us. Our systems do all of the hard work and in terms of interpretation and everything else.
Right.
And the farmer gets delivered essentially a program for a crop or for an area, just a simple program to follow.
So for the farmer, they're testing the soil in a way that doesn't particularly change. The bit that's different is the interpretation of that data. Really,
exactly.
under
The interpretation and the fact that we can provide a full program from base fertilizer all the way through to the end of cropping, so they know exactly what to do at each growth stage to optimize indeed the production of their crop, both in terms of yield, quality, and most importantly, net margin.
Yeah. Now the one nutrient we haven't really covered is nitrogen. So that's obviously the other the really big one that you need to get right. Is that really just a question of having a slightly lower base dressing as originally, because you can rely more on the foliar sprays, or does the model predict nitrogen needs as well, again based on the variety?
Yes, it does, and again it depends. With salad varieties, we probably put more into as base fertilizer because they're a fairly short-term crop. But where we're talking about early main crop or main crop potatoes, top dressings can be actually, as top dressings, eliminated. We're using a fully foliar approach, which is also integrated with the blight spray program, so they can be mixed with blight spray programs, meaning there's no extra journeys. And because the high efficiency of the product we have, which is called Foliar N, it's somewhere between 90 and 95% efficient at full canopy. We can dramatically reduce the amount of nitrogen that's applied over that period, and time it to the needs of that specific variety, whether it's bulking or tuber numbers, etc.
Yeah.
That's a critical point.
We've had a few questions coming in, so I'm just going to turn to some of these questions, and well, if anybody's got a clear answer, or thinks they know exactly what to do, just let me know. So this is an interesting one, which is around equipment. Do you need specialist equipment, and how does it work? Or what type of equipment do you need to apply the products, including like Symposium?
Well, I'll start with that one. We have options. Our standard approach is to use something like an applicator on the planter for the Symposium. That is the preferred methodology, but some growers don't have that. So we have an alternative approach where the product can be applied to the seed tubers days, even a few weeks prior to planting, and that is also a mechanism that will function.
Right. And then linked to that, are these, and Chris, you might know this, the foliar feeds, can they be mixed with other products in the tank? Obviously, if you're trying to reduce the number of passes.
Yeah, highly tank mixable. Yeah, and conventional sprayer. There's nothing particularly needed. We've even given advice on filters and nozzle filters and so on and so forth, but there's nothing special to know. If you've got a farm sprayer, you've got the equipment you need.
Yeah.
And it can be much more accurate.
And you need the dribble bar on the planter, is that right? To put liquid in with the Symposium?
It's more than a dribble bar. It's a pressurized application system, but many farmers have applicators which they previously used for chemical application. Those are perfectly usable. The product goes into the water tank, dissolves, disperses without any issue, and the nozzles are directed on top of the potato, not away from the potato, to give it good coverage at planting. Yeah. But as I say, an alternative, if they don't have an applicator, is that it can be the seed potatoes can be treated in the store before going out, up to a couple of weeks beforehand, if necessary.
Yeah. Linked to this is around management, so not the equipment, but the sort of management process and time and the complexity of it. Can it fit within an existing sort of program relatively comfortably, or are there additional requirements and agronomic processes that people have got to get their heads around to do it right?
I think, as we saw from both the videos, both of the farmers were in Philip Vaux's case, something fairly new to him, whereas with Patrick Elliott, he'd got long-term experience with it. I think they both found that it wasn't that complex, and it fitted into their programs reasonably well. And as Chris has alluded, the fact that it will tank mix with everything else simply means adding in one more thing to the tank mix, rather than having separate visits to the field, which of course would be a bit more of a pain.
It can actually during the blight time, it takes pressure off, and you can reduce the number of passes, which is time and money.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Chris, this might be a good one for you. We've been talking a lot about dry conditions and water stress because we've had a dry year. But what about wet conditions, which we also are prone to get very wet summers, wet conditions? How does this program work in those sorts of conditions?
Well, it's been going for quite some time. It has seen wet years as well. In terms of spray days, I actually see no difference, because the products are very effective. You're just not going to see the effect between drought and not. So to that extent, that gap would be a little bit reduced. But I think in terms of the crop health, the resilience of it to blight and other disease, I think that's going to be strengthened much further.
And if I could just add to that, with some of the products we have some of the biostimulants. So we take last year, 2024, which was a very cool overcast year, we have products which have photosynthetic enhancers in there, which is a posh way of saying essentially it turns a cloudy day into a sunny day. So last year, despite that cool, wet start, cool, damp start and everything else, again, the programs delivered very similar results in terms of overall yields and quality as we've seen this year, and we've seen in other more normal years, if such a thing exists anymore.
Yeah. And let's go to that normal year, because there's another question here about yields. We did touch on yields earlier in the context of one of the the case studies. But if you've got a normal year and the conditions are okay, so not an extreme weather year, what kind of yield premium do you think you can expect if you adopt the programme?
Well, confidently, and you will have heard our growers say that we get somewhere between 15 to 25% yield increases, marketable yield increases. I would say our average is around about 20% marketable yield increase, and at the same time we're reducing inputs. So there's reducing costs, reducing environmental impact, improving the soil condition, and achieving high yields at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. Now I've got off quite lightly on these questions so far. I've been asking them, but this one is for me because it's directed and it's to me, and it's a political one, which is, what do I think the current government will do? They've paused the current SFI and other policies. What do we think happens next? And it's an interesting one. I think they've recently announced that they're going to roll over some of the existing mid-tier schemes, the countryside stewardship ones, which I think they had to do because there was going to be a hiatus otherwise. Yeah. And I think they will probably end up restarting something that's not dissimilar to what we did before, because you do need agriculture schemes that are going to be broad and shallow across the whole farm landscape if you're going to move the dial on some of those environmental targets that they've set, so species abundance. And I think whenever they look at it, they'll come back to the same question, which is, if it's not the SFI, even if you change the name of it, it's got to be doing similar types of things and encouraging the same sort of thing. So my prediction is that they will announce something that they will declare to be their own, and they can hopefully learn to love it, but it probably won't be dissimilar to what I'd done 5 years ago. That's my hope. Moving on, just going through. Really, just one final one. Do we cover the whole of the UK? I know we know we cover Wales and England because they were in the case studies. Yeah. Do you does OptiYield? Have you tried it in Scotland?
Yes, indeed we have some very active customers in Scotland, and indeed we've also done trials work and with an experimental work at the James Hutton Institute in Scotland. So yes, very much on our radar, Scotland. As indeed is other countries. We've done work in France and Belgium. We've even started to do work in New Zealand. So we are looking to broaden horizons beyond just the UK.
Yeah. Okay, Chris. Any final points from you on the?
No, I
these
don't.
Issues?
I don't think so. I think, I suppose, building on your political point, it's up to all of us as business people, as farmers, to make our farms or our soil as resilient and as sustainable as possible. And building that soil health, definitely within the system, what I've seen is that we have to be able to manage these weather variations, and taking on board soil health in the way that this system does, you're building in resilience, not just for the potato crop, but also for the following crop and the following crop, because it's additive.
Yeah. Anyway, we've covered a lot of detail in that science session. I've certainly learned some stuff myself as well. But presumably, Simon, if there are any farmers who want to have even more detailed discussions with you and go deeper into the depths of it, you're willing to have a chat with them and go through some of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, please get in touch with me. And also, of course, both of the case studies, longer versions, are available online for people if they'd like to download them and watch them.
Okay, that's great. Well, all it remains for me to do is to thank Simon and Chris for joining us in this discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have too. So thank you to everyone for joining us on this event.